Hey everybody, hope you guys are doing good today, and thanks for tuning in to the channel. Much appreciated. And today I'm going to do a follow-up on the video I did a couple weeks ago on floating worms. If you guys saw it, or if you'd like to go back and check it, I'll put a link in the description here to the other video. I did a video on some of my secret ways I like to rig a floating worm, which is a big part of it. But probably more important than your rigging part of it is knowing how to select the right color of a floating worm. Floating worm color is the key to being successful with this particular lure category. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through my box, my floating worm box. I'm going to show you each color and let you know when I'd like to fish that particular color under what situation. But real quick, before we guys get started here, just wanted to remind you guys, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe and check out the new Fish the Moment Live YouTube channel, please do so. Johnny and I, we're doing a weekly podcast on the new channel called Fish the Moment Live. And then we also have daily clips on Fish the Moment Live of parts of those podcasts if you miss it. So super informative. It's basically totally focused on our live podcast. Great information, different topics every week. Every day there's a little bit of segment downloaded on it. So check it out, Fish the Moment Live, and subscribe to that. That'd be much appreciated. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about floating worms. I love to fish a floating worm. A floating worm is one of my favorite baits to fish. It's probably I like it even better than topwater fishing. The bite on a floating worm is, to me, one of the most exciting bites that you can get because it's very visual. And usually they don't hit it. It's not like they don't hit it on top like a topwater, but a lot of times you can see the fish hit it. And when we're talking about floating worms, there's a misconception just because of the way the bait's named. These worms don't float, although there are floating worms that actually float. The ones that I use, the Zoom trick worms, are designed to be fished under the surface. And depending upon the water clarity, sometimes I fish it just below the surface, barely. And sometimes I'll fish it as deep as 10 or 15 feet if it's really clear. But the key on this is that to generate the strikes with a floating worm is to know which color to use under which situations. So let's take a look at my box here. I'm going to show you what I got and explain everything. Okay guys, here's my floating worm box, and I'm going to go through each one of these colors and sort of tell you when I use it under which conditions. We'll do some more detail on this later, but basically I just want to go over colors as far as best colors, different situations. This is my tournament floating worm box that I take to tournaments with me. And these colors basically cover every spectrum that you have in fishing. This is primarily a springtime box. Most of the time I'm using this box anytime that water temperature is anywhere between mid 50s to around 70 degrees in the springtime of the year. So let's just go through some of my favorites. We'll start out with the yellow ones here. The yellow ones, anytime that you can get the fish to bite a yellow floating worm, it's usually a bigger fish. The yellow floating worm will get the bigger bites. It's a really aggressive color. It's really bright. It stands out in the water. I'll use it in a lot of different water clarities. It can be clear water. It can be dirty water. It's just a really good bait for those aggressive fish. They'll hit a yellow floating worm a lot of times first thing in the year as far as before most people are fishing a floating worm. So love fishing a yellow floating worm. It's also good on real, cloudy, rainy conditions. The Methiolate is this one right here is an old-time favorite. A lot of people, it's been around forever. This is a good workhorse color. Methiolate is really good in really clear water. If you've got water clarities over 4 or 5 feet, that's the time that I like to go to Methiolate. Also, Methiolate's really good if it's sunny out. The white floating worm is very similar to the yellow in the fact that it really stands out in the water. The time that I like to use a white is if the water has got some stain to it. Say, for example, you've got anywhere between, say, 1 foot to 2.5 foot of visibility. When the fish are really shallow, white is a really good color when those fish, where it's just sometimes it's a little bit too dirty. What most people would think is too dirty for a floating worm, they'll hit a white. And it's really odd because even though the yellow is brighter than the white, they bite the white better in dirty water, and they'll bite that yellow better in clear water a lot of times. Okay, the next one here, this is baby bass. A lot of people don't use this. Baby bass is my color I go to for gin clear water. If I'm fishing water visibility that's in over 8 foot clarity, like 8 to 12 foot clarity, the baby bass is a really good color. It's really natural looking. It's a subtle cover, it's a subtle color, and it works really good in super clear water. Bubblegum is another bright colored favorite. I put them in the same category as the yellows and the whites. A bubblegum is an aggressive fish color. It's one of the oldest colors for floating worms. It works really good in all different water clarities. The thing about bubblegum, you'll find out, the bubblegum works best right around the time the bass are bedding. It's like a lot of times right before they get on the bed, I like the yellow, but when those fish are actually nesting or there's a big percentage of the bass bedding, this bubblegum works really good. Works good in a lot of different water clarities, works good in a lot of different sunlight conditions, sunny, cloudy, whatever is real good. And then there's another variation. This is sort of just an off-colored bubblegum worm. This is another one too. Sometimes I'll use this one, a little bit dirtier water, a little bit more off-colored. Just something to give it a little bit different look. This trick worm here, this is sort of a methylate looking, but it's got sort of some mixed in layers on it like that. It's a little bit brighter than the methylate, but I put this in the same category. It's like when the fish are biting the methylate, and say for example, if the water is really clear but it's cloudy or rainy out, and I want a subtle type color, then I'll go to this swirl color a little bit. It seems like under clouds, rain, that type of stuff, or wind, I'll get more bites. And then finally, I've got this last trick worm here. This another translucent. This is just sort of a blue hue, something like that. This is another really gin clear watercolor. These two colors right here, my baby bass and this natural blue, are my two super clear watercolors. They're real subtle, get a lot of bites in real clear water. But one of the things you want to remember about this floating worms is, say for example, you're having some fish that come up and show themselves on the bright whites and chartreuses like that. If they're showing themselves and they're not, well, let me get back on the other camera here. Okay, back to the face cam here. A little bit about colors. I want to go over the one final thing on colors is if you're using a bright color and the fish are following the bait, which they do a lot of times they'll track behind a floating worm and they'll look at it and swim off. If they start doing that, that's when you can go to the more subtle colors. The subtle colors will get those fish to bite that are chasing but not biting a brighter color. Also, you're going to find that most of the time, not all the time, the brighter colors are going to work better on those low light conditions. Even if the water's clear or dirty, it doesn't matter. Low light conditions, rainy, cloudy, early in the morning, on shady banks, that type of stuff. And the more translucent colors like the natural blue and the baby bass and that type, and methylate, they're going to work better on those bright sunny days, that type of stuff. So a lot of the colors, it's a mix and match with your sky conditions and your water clarity. It's just about like a jig. A jig, if you're flipping a jig, a lot of times you're using those darker colors if the water's dirty, and you're using more like the green pumpkins and clear water. It's the same deal on a floating worm. Brighter colors, dirtier water, low light conditions, the more natural tones in the clear water with the sunny conditions. But it's the thing about floating worm, if you're serious about it, you got to carry a lot of different colors, because floating worm colors are key. They're sort of like a jerk bait. You can't just have one or two colors and expect it to do the whole thing. You got to have a lot of different colors to not only draw those fish up, but also to get them to commit to it and bite the floating worm. But there's a lot more that we're going to talk about it. I can give you a lot of tips on retrieves, how to work the bait, how to manipulate it, the action you put on it. We'll talk about that at a later video. But anyway, just wanted to do one on colors here. Give this a try. I think you guys will have a lot more success this spring on the floating worm. So talk to y'all later, and thanks for tuning in. See you.